Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I thank my colleague for his excellent and tireless work, as I would also thank members from across this House who, in good faith, took the Prime Minister on his word and went and consulted with all of our constituents about this most fundamental issue, how we vote, how we elect governments. I know many colleagues from all sides held town halls and consultations of various sorts. I'd like to start my comments today perhaps with a quote from the Prime Minister himself, who just a couple of months ago said the following things, and this is a quote. "The fact is that Canadians expect that when someone behaves in a way that isn't consistent with their expectations of themselves or Canadians' expectations of them, that they apologize." Well, I would argue that the expectations that Canadians had of this Prime Minister, the expectations that he placed on himself, was that he would be different. That when he made a commitment, that he would keep that commitment, that when he made a promise, it meant something to him. Well, let's listen to what he actually had to say about his promises, and I'll quote again. "Canadians elect governments to do hard things and don't expect us to throw up our hands when things are a little difficult. Oh, it's more difficult than we thought it would be, and therefore we're just going to give up. No, I'm sorry, that's not the way I was raised. That's not the way I'm going to move forward on a broad range of issues, regardless of how difficult they may seem at the given point." What was he talking about? He was talking about electoral reform. In December of this past year, he was talking about his commitment to electoral reform, which was as clear and as black and white as any promise that this Prime Minister and this Liberal Party made, not just during the campaign, but repeated in the throne speech and repeated literally hundreds of times since. That in those town halls that the Prime Minister held across the country, not in British Columbia, strangely enough, but across much of the country, when asked about electoral reform and his commitment, he put his hand on his heart. He looked into the eyes of Canadians and he said, "I am deeply committed to this, and you can bank on this promise. 2015 will be the last election under first past the post." Now, you think when the Prime Minister of a country says something, that Canadians ought to believe it, that they should have enough faith in that Prime Minister's integrity, that when he repeats a promise again and again with such great sincerity and emotion, that you'd think that it would mean something. And if it doesn't, then the very cynicism that this Prime Minister promised to be the antidote towards, that he said that cynicism is killing our democracy, that people, and I'll quote here, lost faith in the Harper government because it broke its promises. I will do better. That was the Prime Minister. Well, the very cynicism he meant to be the antidote of, he is now being a new source of for Canadians, particularly young Canadians. And I want to make this point, Mr. Speaker, that in the last election and since, many young Canadians were excited by this campaign that the Prime Minister ran, because he said, "Look at me, I'm different. I talk differently, I think differently about issues, I think like you, and I think politics can be better." That the days of the old Liberal leaders who would say one thing to get elected, and then as soon as they got into office, realized, hey, we're here now, it works for us now, we can break those promises without any consequence. The lesson we have here today in this motion is the most simple one. It's the one we all learned as children. It's the one that we all hopefully teach our children. That when you make a promise, you should do everything in your power to keep it. And that if you break that promise, you apologize. You admit that it's broken and apologize, and then you work your tail off to restore and regain the trust that has been lost. Now, this shouldn't be hard for some of my Liberal colleagues, because they've already taken a couple of those steps already with their constituents. Open letters. I apologize. We made a promise, we broke the promise, say some of my Liberal colleagues. That's a good thing to do. Admit you made a mistake. Denial is a river in Egypt. Liberals can't deny this one, and some of them have chosen not to. We haven't heard the Prime Minister apologize yet, which is strange to me, because it was him that made that commitment, him that broke that promise, yet he didn't find the courage to be the one who walked out in front of this Parliament and tell Canadians, oh, by the way, all that good faith you placed in me, all those town halls you engaged in, that painful online survey, mydemocracy.ca, that you suffered through, all of that was actually cynical. All of that was some attempt to muddy the waters and arrive at this bizarre conclusion That there's this broad consensus that we invented halfway through the process that we now require doesn't exist. Well, 333 pages from the Electoral Reform Committee put truth to that lie. That the committee was able to listen to experts, listen to evidence. Wasn't that another promise from the Liberals? Oh, we're going to be an evidence-based government. Okay. All right. Well, the evidence, overwhelmingly, my Conservative colleagues, my Bloc colleagues, my friend from the Green Party, everybody paid attention, realized that of all the experts that came forward, 90% said if you're going to change the system, proportional is the one you should put on offer. 86% of the average Canadians that showed up at the open mics wrote to the committee, completed our own survey, which had the audacity to ask questions like, would you like to change the electoral system in Canada? A question the Liberals forgot to ask in theirs. And if you would like to change it, what kind of system are you interested in? Oh my gosh, Canadians somehow were able to handle those tough, mind-boggling questions. 23,000 of them responded to the committee and had no problem. There was no scandal. Well, the Liberals spent $4 million on their consultation process, so the consensus is there and arrives. The only people that couldn't get to the consensus were my Liberal colleagues. And one asks why. Well, as the Prime Minister was breaking his promise, he told Canadians why. He has a preferred electoral system. Never mind that at the committee there was no evidence to support his alternative vote, alternative facts system, his system that says, oh, we'll rank that, because the committee heard from Canadians and from experts that if you're trying to make every vote count, if you're trying to make the system of voting in Canada more fair, alternative vote makes the problems in our current system worse. So you can't do it. Don't do it. And as the Prime Minister and his office, his brain trust, I'll put that in quotes, decided and realized, oh my gosh, when we meant changing the voting system, we wanted to change it our way. And when we went out and consulted with Canadians in good faith, I'm sorry, Canada, but you gave us the wrong answer, says the Liberal Party. You didn't give us the answer that we were looking for. Decision-based evidence-making is the new mantra coming from the Liberals. They're not going to use the evidence that's in front of us, and if the evidence points in the wrong direction, that, oh no, might hurt the Liberal prospects of having majority governments to the end of time, well, then we have to kill the entire process dead. And if the Prime Minister's credibility takes a hit, well, he's very popular, he's a good-looking guy. He'll be able to survive this, won't he? People aren't paying attention, said the Liberals to me. No one cares about this issue, about how we vote or the Prime Minister's promise. And there was a petition that a Canadian asked me to endorse. And I said, sure, electronic petition. We've been doing it for a few years now in the House. Back in November, when he heard the Prime Minister's interview, I think it was La Presse or Le Devoir? Le Devoir. And the Prime Minister said this: electoral reform was a big issue when it was Stephen Harper in office and Canadians were unhappy. But now they're happy. Therefore, their interest in electoral reform is gone because, well, I'm me, says the Prime Minister. Well, this Canadian heard that message, worried properly that the Liberals might be about to break it, so he sent us a petition, and it didn't get a lot of traction. Had a few thousand Canadians who had signed it online just a couple of weeks ago. Well, as of this morning, it's 92,500 Canadians have gone to the site and said, no, keep the promise. I like the promise. I want the promise. And we've been hearing, particularly from Liberal supporters, when I've been on talk radio, in my inbox, and on social media, it's been incredible, who are some variants of totally dismayed and saying, I thought this guy was different, or disgusted, saying this is exactly what we voted against. We didn't want this anymore. We wanted something better, as the Prime Minister promised time and time again. And Mr. Speaker, I'll offer this. For those out there that say Canadians didn't wake up this morning concerned about whether mixed member proportional or STV, that this issue is too much in the quote-unquote weeds to matter in the politics and the discussion. We've got bigger issues to fight this day. This could very well be one of those forest fire issues, because a lot of Canadians care about the integrity and the promise of a Prime Minister. They want to know that they can trust it when he says it, and you can't anymore. And this could be one of those forest fires that are the most dangerous kind. Well, that they burn bright, and you can suppress them, and this happens in my region in British Columbia. And you think the fire is out. People have moved on. And actually what it's done is gone into the roots. My friend from Prince George will know these fires. These are the most dangerous because they can pop up again anytime. And they burn so hot and they burn so long that it will dog a government from now to the time it heads back to the polls and has the audacity to say, we didn't tell you the truth last time, we misled you, we had these other issues that were important. but we didn't do it. Now trust us again. And on my last point, I'd say this. In the current age we live in, Mr. Speaker, with so much global uncertainty, with the rise of this populist and dangerous alt-right movement in the United States and in Europe, that the very inoculation we need is a fair voting system. And the irony that a Prime Minister who was elected in to diminish cynicism, to raise hope and expectations, and the bond, the sacred bond and trust we have as elected people with those who elect us, the second irony is he's walking away from the very proposal that would inoculate this country against those very dangerous movements that are happening globally. The Liberals must apologize. They must reconsider their decision, and they must do the right thing. Keep their word. Canadians expect no less. Thank you very much.